Michael R Fletcher. Now sit back and prepare to be entertained.
With the smooth intro, here we go.
Well, welcome to a slightly more chaotic version of the Dripping Something or Other podcast, where Michael Fletcher and I are harassing Mihir and making him laugh, even though he continuously asked us not to. Yeah, that's us. That's us. This is what everybody signed on for. Nobody can be surprised that we're already falling apart. So, we were talking a little bit about the history of Fantasy Book Critic before, which kind of, Fletcher, it brought to mind for you how FBC has been part of the great contest SPFBO. Mihir, has it been since the first round?
Yes, we were lucky enough to be part, along with Fantasy Faction and Lynn's Books Reviews. We three bloggers or blogger teams have been part of the SPFBO from the first since 2015.
Wow.
By the kindness of the mighty Mark Lawrence.
Yeah. Well, and also by the kindness of you, because that's a lot of books.
Yeah, it's a ton of effort.
30 books a year. This is our 9th year. Plus all of your other blogging enterprises. So yeah, that's a big undertaking. And then, so how did you get involved in SPFBO? Like, was Mark asking for volunteers back then?
Yeah, he basically, he first, again, emailed out of the blue. That's how basically all of my funny stories start. I got an email out of the blue. No, he literally emailed out of the blue saying that, he had this idea. Because again, this was right back in 2014-ish, like late 2014-ish, early 2015. I might be off on the days by just a few months, but somewhere around there, he was like, indie fantasy there's a lot coming out and, it's booming and, we don't really know about what's good, what's not. I mean, yes, you do have a sense of when you read, but again, there's no structure on it. What if he had this contest and he had been talking to Sarah of Bookworm Blues, who's also the editor now. Michael should know all about her, but he was also talking with her. I think he kind of fleshed out this idea of like, what if 10 bloggers got together and we, asked people to just submit their books, and it's of course for free. So, the bloggers would be devoting their time, and then we kind of hashed out the rules. And he basically had asked me like whether I wanted to participate. And I, being the foolish person I was, of course, this was 3 kids. I did not have any kids. I just had my job, and then my only other thing was reading. So I was like, yeah, why not? More books, I'm all for it. And he was like very happy. And then so he got together with 9 other teams along with Fantasy Book Critic. And that's how the first SPFBO started. I think we did not hit the whole 300. I think it was 260, 270 odd. That was the only year that we did not hit the whole 300 books. But I think it took maybe up to 7-ish days, 6, 7, like up to a little less than a week, maybe. Again, my memory is not that great, but we were trying to get the word out, like, hey, this is what SPFBO or SPFBO, as it's like to be called, is about. And maybe the Mark Lawrence is, kind of like the person shepherding this. So I think that helped a lot, because a lot of authors, if it had just been bloggers, nobody would have given 2 shills about it. But the fact that it was Mark Lawrence was already a name back then. And I think that helped tremendously. And that's how, SPFBO got started. And the first round, I think Michael McClung was the first winner of the SPFBO.
The thief who pulled
little
on
known
Troubles.
Fact. Yes.
The thief.
James Islington, the famous published author James Islington, also had submitted his book, The Shadows, not Shadows, something What We Came From Before. I always mess up his title. I'm bad with names, titles, but it was also in the first SPFBO, and unfortunately it got cut. It did not make the finals because it was pitted against Michael's, winning entry. So,
I think that illustrates very well the point that we've been trying to make lately, and perhaps other people have been trying to make all along, that you definitely, even though there's the 10 finalists and the 1 winner, people should also be shopping the the external list of semifinalists and even entries, because it is very much luck. When you're trying to find 1 out of 30, that does not mean that the one is the only good one. It's one of the best of the batch, and so we I've been a part of Before We Go's SPFBO team for 2 years in a row now. And picking one has been so hard and so painful for us both times that I'm aware of, just because we end up with 5 or 6 books that we all really love, and it has to come down to a vote, and there's little to no fist fighting, but it's very painful anyway.
It is.
And yeah, I wish more people would pick up our semifinalists as well, just because they were really, really good. And I think that's a great illustration of it, because Islington has gone on to be huge. Yeah.
Huge. Totally huge. And it also, to your point, Krystle, it depends very much on the blogger, because and Michael will tell you more about this because he was a judge with us last edition. We had such a hard time picking up a finalist. We actually ended up using the Senlin option of selecting somebody else. But even then, it was so hard because there's 2 great titles, and then it was very tricky. And
we had a hard time. We had a hard time selecting which book to send as a Senlin, because we had so many options of really good books, and it's like, well, which one do we have to ultimately stand behind if the other one doesn't get picked? Yeah, there's a lot of good books in SPFBO.
There's a huge amount of luck involved, from the writer side of which blog your book ends up with.
Yeah.
I got really lucky, and blogs that sort of really liked dark fantasy type stuff were the ones that, my book happened to land in their pile.
Yeah.
Whereas there were other blogs who they didn't like it. So had it started with them, wouldn't have made the finals. So, being a semifinalist doesn't mean it was a book's not good enough. It just meant maybe it landed with the wrong reader, that day. It's so much luck involved.
Yeah, I know the same for me. Becky loved Bright Watch because she just so happens to love kind of the whole Venn diagram that I've got going on. But if I had landed in the Fantasy Inn, I would have been a first round cut for sure. So yeah, it's not only what other books you're up against, but it's also which blogs you're placed in, and how many of them are reading, how many of them are selecting, how many of them are scoring, and so it's just potentially there's 300 excellent books.
Yeah, and this sounds cruel, but it's not. This is the best way to kind of to disperse, to keep this competition. To keep the suspense in the competition, because you can't have bloggers selecting titles of I might like this and I might like that. It will lead to a preponderance of certain titles making it through. Because for the last couple of years, we have had amazing wins with titles like Small Miracles, or even Krystle, your book, or somebody like Quenby Olson's book making the finals with Miss Percy. It's this randomness, which sounds cool to the author, but it also helps us bloggers as well, because this way I might get a book which I have never heard of, and I will love it. And that's the joy for me, and that's how it should be. So it's kind of like democracy. It's the best of the worst, but it is what we have.
I did a guest judge spot with FBC last year, right? And if asked, I would have said, I fucking hate cozy fantasy. I hate everything about it. I hate what it's about. I don't like the idea. I loathe it. And then I read Small Miracles, and it was fine. Yeah, this is actually really, really well done. This is a really good book. I loved it. It's kind of it was really good. And then I read Quen's book, Care and Feeding of British Dragons. And I was shit. It was so fucking good. And it was stuff I never would have picked up. I would have just turned my nose up at, but they were so well done. I was appalled.
In my DMs, having an identity crisis. Who am I? I like this book. This is violence against me personally. I'm going to sue Gwen. And it was just, it's such a good illustration of exactly what you're talking about, Mihir, where the randomness of it and the team spread of it lets books take people by surprise in the most charming way. Fletcher's mental breakdown was so fun because I was so happy for Gwen. Just because I like her so much. I was like, she's beaten the dragon that is Michael Fletcher with her charm.
Oh yeah, and the funny thing was that year we had 3 cozy finalists. It was Small Miracles, it was Miss Percy by Wendy Olson, it was I think Scales and Sensibilities by Stephanie Burgess. So it was a very unique year in that sense. So that was fun, and plus Michael was the guest judge for us. That was very cool. Every time he would get a rating from it was like, "What did you think?" And he's like, "Oh damn it, it's good."
Yeah. So you mentioned you guys were in at the first SPFBO, and it took about a week roughly to fill the contest, and it actually fell short for the first one, didn't hit the 300. Do you happen to remember how long it took to hit 300 for the most recent one?
Oh yeah, 42 or 43 minutes. That was the record for SPFBO 9. We were actually placing bets again, not in a bad way. This is just like a fun thing for us because some background story. SPFBO 8 took about 9-ish, or actually 8 hours and 45 or 50 minutes to fill up, or maybe more. You know what? I'm getting my numbers wrong. It took more than 9 hours. It took more than 9 hours to fill up the full 300 because the contest the way it's set up is Mark Lawrence says it has to have at least 250 books, which is why the first time around it was a go, and the max is 300. So it did definitely hit 300 just about 9 hours-ish around in the SPFBO 8, and we were like, oh, so this time it'll be 5 hours, 6 hours, We were blown away. 42 minutes and some seconds and counting. So now the next year, the people are just worried it's going to get filled up in the next 5 minutes. I don't know if it's going to take 5 minutes, but we'll see. But yeah, it was mind-blowing how quickly it filled up. That's
getting scary as someone who is thinking about I'd like to enter a book in a future year at some point.
I don't know.
It's like I have to be awake at that time. Oh, man.
Yeah. And we have a pretty good time zone for it where it hits in our afternoon. I really feel bad for folks who are up in the middle of the night or setting alarms for 2 a.m. or whatever.
That's what happened with DP Williscroft. He had a book actually to enter this year. But because he's in the West Coast with me right now, well, not with me personally in the house, but he's in the West Coast.
Your time zone,
he didn't plan to get up because it was I think it was 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. So he was like, it's going to take a couple of hours at least. I'll wake up, do my job. Not do my job, but, take my morning breakfast. And then and by the time we logged in, it was all done.
Oh, so, that's a shame. Yeah.
It was a shock. Well, but in a weird way, this will be helpful because for next year, because you have authors who are submitting from all over, they'll have, this is unfortunate, they'll have to set a time clock and, get it in. So, again, we can all blame Mark Lawrence. He lives in the UK. Nobody told him to live in the UK. He could have lived in somewhere, the East Coast, maybe.
He used to be in the US, right? He was.
He's an American. He's an American who's, gone back to the UK. So he's infiltrated the UK and he's pretending to be Brit. He's not. He's an American. He knows that. It's all in his interviews.
Whole thing's fake.
Yeah.
I remember, maybe it was the year I was joining SPFBO where I saw some chatter in the SPFBO Facebook group where some judges were reminiscing about how there was a point where they were worried that they wouldn't be able to fill the minimum quota of 250 books. And I don't know if you remember that at all, or maybe it was just the first year that some people were worried about it. But it's interesting to see how rapidly that was destroyed.
Oh yeah, because I think from the second year onwards, we always had 300. In fact, we always go. Mark collects more than 300 books because there's often a few times he has to there's entries which get disqualified. But I think definitely from the second year onward, as far as I recollect, we've always hit 300 plus titles, and then there's a few disqualifications, and he'll put some titles through, and then there's also some titles which kind of sneakily to re-enter, which have been disqualified as well. And shout out to Becky, because I think she was the one who kind of came up with this big huge spreadsheet where you can mark and immediately check whether this title has been entered before or not, and something like that. So.
That's helpful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Follow the rules, people.
The SPFBO, this is number 9, right? We're 9 years in. Are there any ways in which you would like to see it sort of change? Do you have any sort of like thoughts as to how it might be improved without kind of screwing with what works? Because there's a lot of it that actually works really well.
Yeah.
See, this is hard because this is my personal opinion, so please take that with a big caveat.
Yeah. No, fair enough. This is just
the only thing I would let's see, if you tweak one part, some other part goes awry. That's the weird part. Like, you can't. Yeah. There's no one common solution. Maybe just for the worry about people entering, I could think of maybe Mark would open up 3 time slots, the first 100 entries at 12 p.m. GMT, the second batch of entries at 5 p.m. So that way people in different time zones have a better chance. But that's more work for him, and he doesn't like work. And again, to be fair to him,
he's got a life job.
So there's that. From the judges' perspective, I could only think of, and this has been one thing which I have been droning on, that I really wish the judges were a little bit more bold. And let me clarify what I mean by boldness. It's not that everybody chooses a finalist, but sometimes judges are scared to pick a settle-in option. Now, some backstory about what that means. In the second edition of SPFBO, we had a book called Settle-in Essence, which of course did not make the finals, but the judge, Jared of Pornokish blog, wrote a specific review saying how great that book was and why unfortunately could not become the finalist, because there's another even better book, Phil Tucker's book, which actually was the second, which was second in that year's SPFBO. When Mark Lawrence read that review, read the book, loved it, he raved about it, his agent read it, and then of course Josiah Bancroft got picked up and has become the phenomenon that he is. But that led to this idea that hey, maybe sometime a blogger can just, due to random happenstance, get 2 books which are equally amazing. And because they can only choose one finalist, maybe they can put the second book forward to the other judges, saying that, hey, I have a great book. It is maybe it's a 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10. But because I have my finalist, I'm not able to select this book. But you all can read this. And maybe if you feel that your finalists or your books aren't that great, maybe you can select this book. Now, Mark has this principle called the push, not the pull principle, saying that, we as a blogger judge cannot request that I want that book from that blog because I happen to like the author or I happen to like it. It's not up to the blogger. It's up to the blogger who has read that book and saying, I'm pushing it forward if anybody wants it. So far in the history of 9 editions, including this one, we only had 2 settle-in options being selected being selected at all. And both were from FBC. And this is not a point of, just bravado or anything. No, I'm just saying that because we felt that our finalists, and Michael was involved in one decision as well, where we chose the Umbral Storm by Alec Hudson as our, who was given forward to us by a settle-in option. We read that book. We read, the Before We Blogs, Go Blogs settle-in option as well. And we decided that Umbral Storm was the better choice. So that's why we put it forward. Previously, I think in edition 4, Devin Madsen's We Ride the Storm was chosen as a send-in option again by us. I just wish, honestly, that the other blogger judges, because I can understand what pressure that they're facing, because they're like, we have been given these 30 books, and if we deem that they're not good enough, then our authors might hate us. It's not the case of the authors hating you. It's it's one of the ethos of the competition that the best book, ideally, in their opinion, again, keep in mind, this is in their opinion, should make the finalists. So I'm just hoping that the blogger judges can be a little bit more open to the idea that by happenstance, if I don't have, I have 30 good books, but I don't have a great book. And maybe there's this other book which potentially can make the finals and get more eyeballs on it, then why not? So that's the only thing I would hope for. Other than that, honestly, I cannot think of anything else because, like Michael, you said, the competition is fine as it is, and it's really working well. So why tweak it? I don't want to increase the number. I don't want to increase the number of judges because that's a lot more work as well.
It's just more herding cats.
Yes,
a little bit. Sometimes it can be
truly.
a lot of work just to get the organization of it rolling. So
yeah. So, do you have a favorite year?
Ooh.
There's only one right answer.
No, I've got books that were finals in 2 years, so there are two right answers.
I see how this is.
Oh, this is going to be hard. This is very hard. Okay, I'm going to disappoint you both, so I'm sorry. I'm going to choose my favorite year in terms of, the which I felt the best book or lot that we had gotten was in SPFBO 3rd, 2017. And I'll tell you, I'll say why. Because we had Alec Hudson's debut, The Crimson Queen, and we had M.D. Presley's The Woven Ring. Both were debuts, and both were mind-blowingly fantastic. It was because my first two editions, I had good books or I had okay books, but not great books. And in the third edition, I got these two fantastic debuts, and I had a really hard time choosing the finalist. M.D. Presley still curses me to this day for choosing Crimson Queen. I'm sorry, Matthew. But I can tell you, MD, The Woven Ring is equally good. Like, it is, in my mind, the best world building I have ever seen, amongst indie fantasy, amongst all SPFBO books so far. It is that good. It is that brilliant. And if I had to choose another small runner-up, I would choose Norolska Groans, just because that book blew me away. I cannot thank my stars enough that that book happened to be in my lot. And again, that of all the years, again, we had that book and we had Gunmetal Gods in my lot. So I had to choose again.
Oh no!
I had to choose between these two fantastic books. Any other year, Gunmetal Gods would have been my top choice and be like, this is going forward as a finalist. But then that year again, so it's when that dichotomy presents itself. When I get two fantastic books, it stays in my mind, which is why I would choose like 2017 and then I think 2019 was it?
Norolska was SPFBO 7. Yeah, that was the same year.
7. So SPFBO 7. So then that will make it 2021-ish.
Yes.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah.
That sounds right, because that's when I published. So it would have been the same year.
Yeah. So
a couple of months
those were the
published.
two memorable years. I mean, yes, every finals and every year is fun because there's always very much interesting titles which come across and you love them. But for me, those 2 years stand out in my mind because I had to make a choice between two really fantastic books, and it hurt me to make that choice. And those books. I think it's
interesting that the years that stand out to you are the years where it was your batch that blew you away, rather than any of the years or any of the other finalists. Because and having been through now 2 cycles, I really understand that. Because once the finalists are selected, now we're just talking about them. And it's less painful somehow, because it's like, okay, there's no more choices to make. This is just the books that we have. Whereas the rounds where we have to choose those favorites is so hard. And I think it also illustrates what I felt when I was a finalist, where that slot of 10 is the win, and then
right.
the grading system that we endure after is just the price that we pay for winning, because being one of those 10 is equally as memorable as any of the particular winners, because there are people from every year that go on to do like great things, kind of in spite of where they placed. And then also, I think just being able to be that visible in indie fantasy, which is so crowded and it's really hard to be visible, that is absolutely the prize. And then picking the winner is just a formality. Although I didn't win, so maybe that's really easy for me to say. We'd have to ask somebody who actually wins. Michael, you didn't win either.
No, I didn't.
Yeah.
Sigh.
It was close. The Michael came second. I remember Blackstone Heart came second by like a half point. It was that close.
Yeah. Not bitter.
Yeah.
Totally accepting of that. It's fine. Yeah. I'll get over it someday. Alrighty.
Oh, it was Justin.
Yes.
Again.
Oh yeah, Justin. Yeah.
Yeah, he's way more charming than you are. You really needed the boost.
Yeah, but that's super difficult, right?
Yeah.
Like, can you be more charming than a grumpy guy?
I mean, the Canadian accent and the British accent. The British accent is kind of.
Yeah, that's like cheating.
It is.
It is.
Hey, I have an Indian accent. I'm not even in the race. Like when there's talk about charming accents, we don't even get in. Like it's like, oh,
no,
you're Indian.
You're okay. You're still way more charming than Fletcher. It's okay. He set the bar really low.
The abuse I endure.
Yeah, you just like the attention. Be honest.
Alrighty. On that note. Let's wrap this episode up. Join us again next week when we discuss whether there's any place in for stuff. Anyway, I don't know. So that's right. We're gonna talk about heroic fantasy and Mihir's love of that and why Krystle and I are failing to write our fucking book.
Yes.
At a rate which he finds acceptable.
Yeah.
Join us next week for that riveting episode.
Yeah. Thanks for coming by again, Mihir.
Ciao.